You went to Texas Tech for about a month and change, and then decided this was the right opportunity for you. What made you feel that way, and how difficult was that to sort of transition that quickly?
It was fairly difficult from the sense that I had closed on a house about 2 hours before Coach Franklin called me, but no, just jokingly. So not difficult at all because of my relationship with Coach Franklin. Obviously, it's Penn State. It's an iconic program, so pretty easy decision once I had kind of the nuances of just being there. I was there for 5 weeks, and had kind of gotten used to those players, had recruited a bunch of kids to go there, had brought an assistant with me from Memphis. So there was some logistical things that made it difficult. And to be quite honest, without Coach Franklin, I probably wouldn't have left there. That's probably one of maybe 2 people in the country that I would have left. Matt Wells, who I'd worked for previously, for that situation. So from a logistical standpoint, it was tough, but from a decision-making standpoint, it was really pretty easy.
Hey, Coach. How are you?
Good.
Good. Curious what your initial thoughts on Jake Pinegar, your kicker. Came on pretty strong in Big Ten play last year. I think he had more 40-plus yard field goals than anyone in the Big Ten. A little rough in the Citrus Bowl in terms of his confidence, but sitting down, speaking with him, where do you feel like he is going into year number 2, and how much of a weapon can he be for this team?
Well, I think he could be a tremendous weapon. I was really impressed. One of the things that I try to do when I come in new somewhere is not have preconceived notions, and also understand that guys as freshmen, it's hard to come in and start as a freshman, especially at this level. It's a pressure-packed situation. So I try not to have too many preconceived notions. I didn't look at all the kicking charts and all that kind of stuff that were done throughout the year. I did watch all the film, for obvious reasons, so I know kind of what I'm walking into. But I was impressed with his approach. I really wanted to find out. You tell me where you think you're at. You tell me where you think you struggled. You tell me where you think the issues were, and I was impressed with with his response. I was impressed with that he didn't make excuses. He took accountability for the things that he thought he didn't do very well at, and he was proud of the things that he did do well, and he has a good plan, in my opinion. Obviously I'll assist with it, but he's got a good plan of how he can get better.
Joe, can you describe your philosophy? What do you emphasize, those kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So my mantra has changed the game. You'll see CTG on things around here. It's a trademark that I have. So special teams is going to impact the game, every game, either positively or negatively, right? And clearly we want to have the positive side. But what we really, I was going to say try to do, but we don't try to do it. What we do, I've done it at multiple places, is we create a culture, and that's really the biggest difference. Everybody in the country. I just told the team this in my first meeting with them the other day. Everyone in America, every team I've ever been a part of, they all talk about special teams. Everybody does. Almost nobody really does what they say they're going to do, right? And so, number one, it comes from the head coach. You talk about making the decision. Coach Franklin supports special teams 100,000%. I wouldn't take a job where the head coach didn't. But then, we do a lot of unique things. One of the things that we do that's really unique is we have individualized meetings, which that might sound like kind of a basic concept, but no one does that. So I try to model everything like you would offense or defense. I was a defensive coordinator for many years. And so when you have your defense, you don't meet every day as a whole defense, because the corners need to hear different things than the D-line, who needs to hear different things than the linebackers, right? You meet once in a while as a defense, but you meet most of the time individually. Well, on special teams, no one does that. They go in and they meet all together for 15 or 20 minutes or whatever it is every day. So again, I try to model it like that. So we'll have individualized meetings. So if you're in punt, you'll just be with your position group. Sounds like a little thing, but over the course of a season, the amount of individual attention that those guys get, and the amount of them paying attention in the meetings, because you're just talking about their position, is exponential. And it gets all the other coaches and staff to buy in. Special teams can't be about me. It's not my deal, it's our deal. When you get a collective group together like that, really special things happen.
How many hours do you think you watched the film on the scene from last year, and was there a glaring issue or two that really stuck out to you that said, hey, this is what we got to do?
How many hours? Well, I didn't have any spring break. I was up here way too much. So too many. I felt like to get a good grasp on the team, I wanted to watch all offense, all defense, and all special teams just to kind of, I was involved in my own season last year, so I didn't see Penn State very much, you know, so I always kind of follow it because of my relationship with Coach Franklin, but just as far as knowing the players and those kind of things, I wanted to watch everything. So I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 hours. I mean, that's what I did every day last week. So, and you know, I think there was some glaring things like balls being kicked out of bounds. You know, there was 6 balls kicked out of bounds last year on kickoff. That's a bigger number that I've seen. Some of the missed field goals were, almost all of them were from the exact same spot on the field on the right hash. So there was some things that stuck out. But to be honest with you, I saw a lot of really good things also. I mean, I know there was some issues of giving up a kickoff, return for a touchdown, some things like that. But I saw a lot of really talented guys that play really hard. And that, if you have that, you can build the culture that I'm talking about pretty easily, I think. And it's what I told the team the other day. The fastest way you can improve as a football team is in your special teams units. That's the fastest, easiest thing to improve. Especially at a place like this, where, as I said, it comes from the top down. I think I'm excited about the challenge.
You mentioned the first meeting. What was the team's reception when you go in there and you're kind of telling them? Because a lot of these guys have had plenty of different faces the last few years.
Yeah, that's always a little bit of a challenge. You know, it's really, you can tell by people's body language. You know, that's because most people aren't going to be rude to you to your face or say something. So I really judge it by people's body language. And then what I try to do is I try to back up, like you said, I'm a special teams coordinator, so of course I'm going to get up and talk about the importance of special teams, and there's a lot of similarities in philosophies with all of us and those kind of things. So what I try to do, what I do is I back it up with data. Okay, so I showed them in 2017, the Big Ten champions and the teams that played for the Big Ten championship, they also were top 2 in the conference in special teams units. I showed them in 2018, the teams that played for the Big Ten championship were also the top 2 units in special teams on their respective sides when you look at the special teams numbers. And it's the same thing in the NFL. I showed them the Super Bowl champions from 18, Super Bowl champions from 17, and the top 4 teams all were the Final 4 in the playoffs. So there's a direct correlation. And then I talked to them about, they don't want to hear too much about other places, but I talked to them about some of the things that we did at my previous stop. One of the things when I first got to Memphis and I sat in a room just like this, and I was asked about it every single day. They had the longest kickoff return drought in the history of college football. It was a 20-year drought. They had not returned a kickoff for a touchdown. It was the longest in history. We broke the record in our last game there that we are now tied for the most ever in college football history with 8. So I don't say that to be like the brag. I'm saying I wanted to show these guys tangible evidence of the things that we can do if and when they buy into this philosophy. And before that, really, it was getting the coaches aligned and on board. And not to allude to the fact that they weren't, but I'm saying to come in here and establish the culture, because really, it's not me. It's our deal. It has to be all the position coaches. It has to be the head coach. It has to be the team doctor. It has to be the equipment guys. Everybody has to understand and not undermine the importance of that and truly, truly believe in it. And when you have that culture on your football team, it's incredible what will happen. I've seen it numerous times.
Joe, could you share what your recruiting responsibilities will be in terms of positions and areas? And also, you've had a lot of success in Southern California. Do you think that can translate for a school like Penn State that traditionally has not gotten a lot of kids out of Southern California?
Yeah, I do think, as long as I have deep ties there, just because I've recruited there since 1999, I believe. So have a lot of relationships there. Recruiting's about relationships. Anytime you have those kind of relationships, you can lean on people to give you accurate information. So I do think that can be a help, as we kind of call that out of our footprint, though. So I don't know how, I don't know what that number looks like yet, but I do know that it's already come up a couple of times where there's kids from California that have come here already or are planning on coming here, and I knew their high school coach, so I think I can help to bridge that gap. My recruiting area here, I have a piece of Pennsylvania. I don't know good enough yet to tell you, like, it's Erie County, I believe. I'll have a part of Delaware, a part of Maryland, and then the Space Coast area of Florida. And then I'll national recruit for specialists. We'll get the very best specialists in the country to come here.
Coach, I know you haven't been here for that long, but has there been anyone that you've seen that can really make an impact for you guys on defense and special teams?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, there's a bunch of them. I wouldn't want to point out anybody specific because there's a whole bunch of them. I think there's a lot of really good players here. You know, obviously KJ stands out just because he's a really dynamic returner. You know, right when I started watching that last week, I texted Coach Franklin like, wow, I told you about that guy. So, no, I think that it's, and really in the system that I'm talking about, obviously you got to have good players. That's clear. But really, it's like, it's collective, right? It's not just having one great returner. You know, we did the kickoff return thing at Memphis, but you know, when you watch it, one of the things that I'm proud of, and I used to point this out to those guys all the time, is I pause the tape. And yeah, we had a great returner. They had D'Angelo Williams before. He didn't score a touchdown. He's pretty good too, right? So it was the collective of the whole group that made a difference. And I think this roster is built with a lot of really good playmakers, and I think we can rely on some of the guys that are already playmakers on offense and defense, and I think we can develop and continue to develop a core group of guys that maybe they're not the best corner or safety or receiver or not the most experienced, you know, to be able to play, or they don't know the plays good enough yet, and they can have an impact on special teams, because special teams, you can't have lesser players, but they don't have to think as much, right? It's simpler. I'm not having to learn a really complicated playbook and then adjust if they're in cover 2 or cover 3 or cover 4. There's so much more thinking on offense or defense than there is in special teams. So you can take a guy that's less experienced and they can play sooner.
Hi, Coach. 2 questions. What are going to be your defensive responsibilities? And you've known James for at least 20 years. Did you see his success coming, and was there an opportunity in the past 20 years where he may have hired you and it just didn't happen?
Yeah, so your first question was what? I'm sorry.
Defensive responsibilities.
Yeah, okay, so defensive responsibilities. We're still working that out. You know, in the past, I've been a part of 3-4 schemes, and so we had an inside linebacker coach, an outside linebacker coach, a secondary coach, and a D-line coach, and I've always coached the outside linebackers. This structure is a little bit different because it's a 4-3 defense, and so there's not those extra kind of 2 guys. So right now I'm assisting just as needed. Today I'll be with Coach Prybe and the meetings with him. But I'm very experienced with linebackers, safeties, and corners. So I think that I could kind of jump around to wherever's needed. I think they've talked about maybe some of the nickel stuff, what they call star, maybe getting a little bit of work with that outside linebacker Sam position. So I think a little bit of it's just kind of feeling each other out at this point. And in answer to your question about Coach Franklin, yeah, we were roommates together at Idaho State back in 1999. I knew he was special from the, I mean, you can just tell the minute he walks in the room. He's extremely bright, very, very ambitious, always has been very ambitious, you know, dominates the room when he walks in. I mean, we all knew back then that he was going to do something special. I didn't, you know, obviously know where it would end up being. Pretty cool for him from where he's from to have this opportunity. He has not offered me a job in the past, but I felt like it was coming. You know, there's a coaches convention every year. Every year, him and I would bump into each other and grab a cup of coffee and stuff, and I knew he was following what I was doing because he would always say, hey, I saw your game against Houston, or I saw your game against Stanford, or whatever it was. So I knew he was following my career, and I knew he had said good things to Mike Norvell, who's my head coach there, in the past. So I felt like an opportunity would probably come at some point. I just didn't know when.
We have time for 2 more. We'll start with Tyler.
You mentioned KJ a couple questions ago. We saw him get work at punt returner and kick returner last year. Curious what your philosophy is, using the same guy as KJ at the level where that's going to be your initial approach. And additionally, we saw Jahan Dotson involved. DeAndre Tompkins, who's gone, was involved there. Who do you think, I know you didn't want to mention a bunch of specific names, but who do you really think you're going to put back there early in spring, see how they field punts, kicks, and get a feel for them?
Yeah, so what we'll do a thing called daily skill every single day when we're not scrimmaging. And what it is it's the kick returners catching the balls on one side, the punt returners catching the balls on the other side, and all the guys that you just mentioned will be there, and they'll flip every day. So not everybody, but the guys that do both will flip. So if I was catching punts one day, I'll catch kick returns the next day, and vice versa. But I can't really answer to it. They're all going to be back there. I'm going to evaluate them. I'm going to make sure the guys that are dynamic enough to play there. I also got to make sure we have guys that make great decisions. That's going to be really, really important that we make good decisions. We have 2 goals in special teams. Number 1 is to own the ball, right? So that means on our coverage units, we're going to be attacking the ball, and on our return units, we're going to make great decisions to make sure that we're never giving up a possession for our offense, right? And number 2 is no penalties. So a big part of what we do, that's our only goals, okay? A big part of what we do is making sure that not only dynamic players, I think we'll have plenty of those, but also great decision makers in those situations.
Just general philosophy, no hesitancy to use the same guy in both roles if he earns that job?
Yeah, if he's the best guy, he's going to play. What our philosophy that Coach Franklin and the staff and I have discussed is making sure that guys don't start on more than 2 special teams units unless it's approved by the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and head coach. What I do, because you want to make sure you're not overusing guys and being selfish, which is kind of easy to do when you get a special player. What I do is weekly I will have a play count for the week and for the year, talking about in the season now, that will be distributed to Coach Franklin, the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, and myself, so we can say, hey, you know, make sure KJ played 11 special teams plays last week and he's played 34 on the year, and kind of manage that number. Then if a guy's, sometimes you find out a guy's not being used, you know, like at Memphis we had 3 really good running backs. So the head coach said they rotate all the time, start them on 4 if they're good enough. So it's just going to vary with those kind of situations. But I do keep a very active play count to make sure we're not overusing or underutilizing a guy.
How you doing?
Good.
Question about freshmen. You mentioned being able to play people early because of the more simplistic side of special teams.
Yeah.
It seems like freshmen across the country are coming in ready to play earlier and earlier. Is that the same thing? And I want to ask specifically about the specialist positions, because it seems like there's more training physically and kind of infiltrating the high school side for offense and defense. Do you find specialist punters and kickers and things like that coming in as well prepared or more well prepared in the past?
No, I think that they're well prepared physically. The hard part for a specifically specialist is the mental side of it. There's lots of guys, tons and tons of guys that have good enough legs, right, for a punter or a kicker or good enough snappers. It's the mental side of the game that's really hard. It's very much like golf in that way. So that's where I think the challenge is when a guy comes in and he has to be in this environment, and he was in high school 4 months ago. It's not undoable. I mean, I've had people do it, but in my experience, what I try to do, you know, you have to be somewhere for a while, obviously, but what I try to do is I try to be a year ahead in recruiting. So if I have a junior kicker, I had Jake Elliott, the kicker for the Eagles, so when he was a junior, I recruited and signed the guy that I knew was going to replace him. So he had a year to train under Jake, and then I was able to bring who is now Memphis' starting kicker, Riley Patterson. So, but he had that gave him a year to develop, figure things out, get stronger, focus on academics. There's so many things that come into play for these student athletes that, when, you know, especially when they first get there, they're getting used to time management, living away from home, the pressures of Division I football. There's so many things that they're dealing with that if you can give them a year to get acclimated, that's the ideal situation. You can't, it doesn't always work that way, but you try to do it that way.
Thank you very much, Coach.